What if the doorway to another dimension wasn't buried under a pyramid, or hidden somewhere in deep space, or locked inside a government lab in the Nevada desert? What if it was sitting in someone's backyard, in rural Washington, covered by weeds, dirt, rusted scrap metal, and waiting? In 1997, a man named Mel Waters called into a late-night radio show and told a story so strange that most people dismissed it immediately. A hole, not a cave, not a mine shaft, not an abandoned well, a hole. A black opening in the ground that, according to Mel, had no bottom. And that alone would be weird enough. But then came the dog. According to Mel's account, a neighbor threw a dead dog into the hole. Days later, that same dog was seen running through the woods, alive. Same markings, same collar, same dog. And if that sounds impossible, good, because impossible is exactly where this story begins. Mel Waters said the hole was on his property near Ellensburg, Washington. A quiet place, rural, unremarkable. The kind of place where people mind their own business, fix their own fences, and don't expect reality to split open behind the house. At first, Mel treated the hole like a local curiosity, a strange pit, a dumping spot. People tossed things into it, old refrigerators, trash, animal remains, whatever they didn't want to deal with anymore. And apparently, nothing ever came back. No crash, no impact, no echo, no sound, just silence. That's the first part that should bother you, because even a deep hole talks back. Drop a rock into a well and eventually you hear something. A thud, a splash, a scrape, air movement, something. Mel said this hole gave back nothing, like the sound didn't travel down, like it got swallowed. On paper, the mainstream explanation is simple. A bottomless hole can't exist. Geology doesn't allow it. The deeper you go into the earth, the more pressure builds. Heat increases. Rock shifts. Water collects. Cavities collapse. Eventually, physics wins. That's what experts would say. And honestly, that makes sense. A hole that goes down forever is not supposed to exist. Except Mel didn't just claim it was deep. He claimed it behaved wrong. And that's where the story starts to crack. Because according to Mel, the hole didn't act like a natural formation. It didn't act like an old mine. It didn't act like a sinkhole. It acted like a wound in the world. He said it absorbed light. He said it produced no echo. He said animals didn't want to go near it. And most disturbing of all, some things lowered into it came back changed. Now, depending on who you ask, Mel Waters was either one of the strangest witnesses in American paranormal history, or a man spinning a story that got completely out of hand. That's the clean version. That's the safe version. But then the details start piling up, and once you hear enough of them, it becomes harder to laugh the whole thing away. Mel claimed he tried to measure the hole, not with a few feet of rope, not with a casual fishing line from the garage. He said he lowered roughly 80,000 feet of line into it. That's over 15 miles. Think about that. 15 miles straight down. That is more than twice the depth of the Mariana Trench. And according to Mel, it still didn't hit bottom. Not once. No tension change. No impact. No end. Just line disappearing into blackness. At some point, this stops sounding like a hole and starts sounding like a machine. Because natural holes have limits, even absurdly deep ones. They have walls, collapse points, water, heat, something. But Mel described a void that seemed to ignore the basic rules. And then came the sensory anomalies. He said if you shouted into it, there was no echo. That detail sounds small. It isn't. Sound needs surfaces. It bounces. Even caves echo. Even wells echo. If a space is deep enough, maybe the echo is faint, delayed, distorted. But total silence? That's different. That suggests one of two things. Either the opening was shaped in some impossible way that completely swallowed sound, or the sound was going somewhere it couldn't return from. Then there was the ice. According to the story, Mel lowered a bucket of ice into the hole. When he pulled it back up, the ice had not melted the way you'd expect, but it felt warm to the touch. Not hot, warm, wrong. That's the kind of detail people forget to fake badly. It's not flashy. It's not dramatic enough for a movie poster, but it's deeply uncomfortable, because it suggests the hole wasn't simply cold, hot, wet, or dry. It suggests the hole was interacting with matter in a way Mel couldn't explain. Energy went in. Something else came out. And that brings us back to the dog. Because if the dead dog story is even partially accurate, then Mel's hole was not just deep. It was not just strange. It was doing something to lift. Maybe the neighbor misidentified the dog. Maybe the whole story became distorted through retelling. Maybe grief, rumor, and late-night radio turned a rural legend into something bigger. That is possible. But if the account is accurate, then the hole wasn't a pit. It was a boundary. A place where death, time, and matter stopped behaving normally. And apparently, someone noticed. Mel Waters went public on Coast to Coast AM. That was the mistake. Because stories like this are funny when they stay local. They're harmless when they're just campfire material. But once they hit the airwaves, once millions of people hear them, the story changes. Mel claimed that after his radio appearance, strange men arrived. Government-type men. Men who did not act curious. They acted informed. According to his account, his property was taken over. The area was locked down. Military personnel appeared. He was warned, pressured, paid, then pushed out. Australia. That's where Mel said he ended up. Not because he wanted a fresh start, because, according to him, he was moved away from the one thing he was never supposed to talk about again. And then came the strangest administrative detail. His land records, he claimed, disappeared. Not misplaced, not hard to find. Gone. Now, records can be messy. County archives are not exactly known for elegance. Names get misspelled. Properties change hands. Files get lost. That happens. But if a man publicly claims he has a bottomless hole on his land, then claims the government seized it, then claims the records vanished, you don't have to believe him to admit something doesn't sit right. At the very least, the story started behaving like the hole itself. The deeper people looked, the less they found. And here's where we take one breath. Because let's be honest, if I found a bottomless pit in my backyard, the first thing going in is every parking ticket I've ever received. Maybe a printer that never worked right. Maybe my old tax paperwork, just to see if the IRS is willing to follow it down. But a resurrected dog? No. At that point, I'm not investigating. I'm calling a realtor. I'm selling the house, the land, the lawnmower, and possibly my identity. Because there's curiosity, and then there's common sense. And common sense says, when the dead dog comes back from the magic hole, you leave. Still, that little moment of absurdity hides a serious point. Why would the military care about an empty hole? If Mel was lying, why respond at all? If the story was nonsense, why not ignore it? That is where this case gets its teeth. Because one theory says the government didn't seize the property because Mel was making things up. They seized it because he found something. Not a cave, not a well, not a sinkhole. An access point. Some researchers and paranormal investigators have suggested Mel's hole may have been an entrance into the hollow earth. Others think it was a tear in space-time, a natural anomaly, a portal, a place where dimensions overlap badly. And yes, That sounds insane. But so does a bottomless pit that returns dead animals. The deeper theory goes like this. There are places on Earth where the normal rules thin out. Not break completely. Thin. Magnetic anomalies. Time slips. Energy drains. Regions where instruments fail, animals panic, and human perception gets unreliable. Most of those stories get pushed into folklore. The Bermuda Triangle, Skinwalker Ranch, certain caves, certain mountains, certain restricted zones that somehow always end up fenced off. Maybe Mel's Hole was one of those places. Maybe it was a natural geological anomaly with strange electromagnetic effects. Maybe it was a military site long before Mel ever called the radio. Or maybe Mel stumbled onto something older than the government itself. That's the part people don't like. Because if there are locations on Earth that connect to something beyond normal reality, then modern civilization is not sitting on solid ground. It's sitting on a locked basement. And every now and then, somebody finds a door. Area 51 became famous because people believed the government was hiding recovered craft. Technology not meant for public eyes. But Mel's Hole suggests something even stranger. Not recovered technology. Access. A location. A permanent breach. If you control that, you don't just control a secret. You control a possibility. And maybe that is why, according to Mel, ordinary ownership stopped mattering. A common man had land. A strange hole was on that land. Then powerful people allegedly arrived and made sure he no longer stood between them and whatever was below. If that account is true, it is not just a paranormal story. It is a story about who gets to own the impossible. That's the real nerve. Because the public is often told we are not ready. Not ready for the truth. Not ready for disclosure. Not ready for what sits outside the accepted map of reality. But somehow, the people saying that always seem ready to own it, study it, and weaponize it behind closed doors. Funny how that works. Now, skeptics will say there is no verified evidence that Mel's Hole exists. They'll say there are no confirmed coordinates, no public excavation, no official documents proving a military seizure. And that's fair. Those points matter. A story this strange needs caution. It deserves caution. But it also deserves something else. Memory. Because even if Mel's story cannot be fully proven, it points to a pattern Americans have seen before. A strange claim appears. Witnesses speak. The media laughs. Authorities stay quiet. Records get muddy. The witness disappears from the public eye. And years later, people are still asking why the official explanation feels less like an answer and more like a lid. So maybe Mel's Hole was a hoax. Maybe it was a misidentified mine shaft. Maybe it was a radio legend that grew legs and walked into internet history. That is one possibility. But if it was only that, why does the story still feel unfinished? Why does it keep coming back? Why do people keep searching for it? And why does the central image refuse to leave the mind? A black hole in the ground. No bottom. No echo. No explanation. A dead dog running through the trees. It sounds like folklore. Until you remember that folklore often begins with someone seeing something they were not supposed to see. And maybe that's what happened in Washington. Maybe Mel Waters didn't find the center of the earth. Maybe he didn't find another dimension. Maybe he found something much worse. A place where reality is not broken, but edited. A place where the rules we trust are only local rules. A place that proves our world is not sealed. And if the government really did move in, If the land really was taken, if the records really were erased, then maybe they weren't protecting people from a hole. Maybe they were protecting the whole from people. That's a tough pill to swallow, because it suggests that the most dangerous thing Mel found was not underground. It was the truth that ordinary people are not allowed to own certain discoveries. Not if those discoveries threaten power, not if they rewrite physics, not if they prove the world is stranger than the public version. And that leaves us with one final discomfort. If Mel's hole was real, where is it now? Is it sealed, guarded, covered with concrete and cameras? Is there a facility sitting over it? Or did they simply erase the trail so well that the hole became what they wanted it to become? A joke, a ghost story, a weird little radio call from the 1990s, something people laugh at before moving on. Maybe that was the point. Because the easiest secret to hide is not the one buried deepest. It is the one people are trained to mock. The truth is like water. It leaks. It slips through cracks. It waits. And no matter how many records vanish, how many witnesses get ridiculed, how many stories get swept under the rug, something always comes back up. Sometimes it's a document. Sometimes it's a witness. Sometimes it's a rumor that refuses to die. And sometimes it's a dead dog in the woods. So what do you think? Was Mel's hole a portal to another dimension? A doorway into the hollow earth? A massive government psyop? Or just the strangest campfire story America never managed to bury? And be honest, if this thing was in your backyard, what's the first thing you'd throw in? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, stories buried between official history and forbidden possibility, subscribe to Forbidden Origins US, because the deeper we look, the less solid the ground becomes.